May 22, 2010. A rain-soaked runway at Mangalore's Tabletop airport. AirIndia Express Flight 812 descends fast, the edge of the cliff rushing closer. In seconds, a routine landing will turn into one of India's deadliest aviation tragedies.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take the complex stories, the detailed reports, and distill them for you. Today, we're heading to Mangalore International Airport in India.
Ah, yes, Mangalore.
It's known for, well, one of the most striking and challenging runways you'll find anywhere. Picture this, a plateau, like a giant tabletop, right? But on either end, steep valleys, deep gorges, just falling away. It makes landings and takeoffs, too, inherently risky.
Yeah.
There's very little margin if you overshoot or undershoot.
It really is a unique setup, and Air India Express knew it. They actually had a special rule, didn't they?
They did. Only the pilot in command, the PIC, was cleared for takeoffs and landings there. No co-pilots allowed to handle that part.
It's a crucial piece of context for our deep dive today. We're looking into the tragedy of Air India Express flight IX-812. This was a Boeing 737-800 flying from Dubai to Mangalore back on May 22, 2010.
And it ended devastatingly. 158 people lost their lives. Only 8 survived.
So our aim here is to understand the sequence of events, the compounding factors that led to this disaster, and importantly, what safety lessons came out of it. We'll stick to the facts, approach this with the seriousness it demands.
Absolutely. So let's start at the beginning. The flight itself, IX-812, it left Dubai around 2:36 a.m. Indian time.
Right. And the initial phases, takeoff, climb, the start of the cruise, everything seemed perfectly normal. Routine, really.
A standard flight. But who was in the cockpit? Tell us about the crew.
Okay, so there were 2 pilots. The captain, the PIC, was Zlatko Glusica. He was 55, Serbian, very experienced, over 10,000 flight hours. And importantly, he knew Mangalore. He'd flown in there 16 times before.
Okay, so familiar with the challenges.
Yes, and his first officer was HS Aluwalia. He was 40, Indian, and actually based in Mangalore. He'd flown this route as a co-pilot 66 times. So again, very familiar.
2 experienced pilots, both familiar with a tricky airport. That sounds like a good combination on paper.
It does. But the investigation looked deeper into the dynamics, the personalities. Some colleagues described Captain Glusica as, well, assertive. Maybe even someone who believed he was, and I quote, always right.
Okay. That can be problematic.
It can create a certain atmosphere. The first officer, Aluwalia, was seen differently described as meticulous in his adherence to procedures. Maybe quieter, a man of few words.
So potentially a steep authority gradient there. One very assertive captain, one meticulous, but perhaps less vocal first officer.
That's exactly what the investigators considered. And then you look at the cockpit voice recorder, the CVR, and what it picked up, or rather didn't pick up, is, well, it's startling.
What did they find?
For the first hour and 40 minutes of the recorded flight time, and the whole recording was just over 2 hours, there was essentially silence between the pilots. No conversation.
An hour and 40 minutes. What was happening?
The captain was asleep. The CVR recorded sounds of snoring, deep breathing intermittently throughout that whole period.
Yep.
The first officer handled all the radio calls, everything. You can hear him making routine calls, like this one, to Mumbai radio around 5 a.m. Mumbai Radio Express, India 812, position. Masan at 25, maintaining flight level 370. Nairdex 42, Osiri next.
And the captain's asleep while this is happening.
Confirmed asleep, yes. Now, context is important here. This flight was operating right in the middle of the night, during what scientists call the window of circadian low, or WOCL.
That 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. window when our bodies naturally want to be asleep. Alertness is at its lowest.
Precisely. And waking up suddenly from deep sleep during that window, it can lead to something called sleep inertia.
Right, that grogginess, the impaired judgment you feel just after waking up.
Exactly. Your brain isn't firing on all cylinders yet. And the investigation concluded this was a major contributing factor. The captain woke up not long before the most critical phase, the descent and approach likely still suffering from that sleep inertia.
So his judgment, his decision-making ability, could have been seriously compromised right when he needed it most.
That's the concern. It highlights how human physiology, basic tiredness, can undermine even extensive training and experience.
Okay, so the captain wakes up, likely impaired by sleep inertia. They're starting their approach into Mangalore. What happens next?
Well, this is where the errors really start to pile up. They first contacted Mangalore Area Control around 5:32 a.m. And here's a key detail. Mangalore's main radar system, the MSSR, was down, It had been unserviceable for a couple of days.
No radar guidance at that airport.
Correct. ATC was using procedural control, basically relying on pilot position reports rather than seeing them on a screen. You even hear ATC say it, radar not available, sir.
Okay, so that adds complexity. They're relying entirely on their instruments and procedures.
Yes. And then there's the descent itself. They asked to descend when they were about 130 miles out, but ATC had other traffic, so they had to wait.
Delayed descent.
Right. They finally got cleared to descend to 7,000 feet when they were only 77 miles out, 77 DME. That's much closer than usual for starting the descent profile for Mangalore.
So they were playing catch-up from the start, trying to lose altitude faster.
Essentially, yes. This put them high on approach above the ideal glide path they should have been on for a smooth landing.
And was the communication better now? Were they briefing properly?
Unfortunately, no. The first officer gave a brief update on weather and the approach around 5:41 a.m., but the captain's response wasn't really engaged. The whole approach briefing was incomplete, rushed, not by the book, not according to their standard operating procedures or SOPs.
Those critical checklists and procedures they're meant to flock.
Exactly. Checks that should have been done way back, around 150 miles out, were happening much, much later. The captain only really started talking actively on the mic about 13 minutes before the crash. Situational awareness was compromised.
13 minutes.
Right.
Wow. So high on approach, rushed checks.
Yeah.
How did they try to compensate?
The captain deployed the speed brakes around 50 miles out. These are panels on the wings that pop up to increase drag, help you slow down or descend faster.
Right, to try and force the plane down onto the correct path.
But they kept them out for long periods during the approach, which isn't standard and can make the aircraft harder to handle smoothly, further destabilizing things.
Which leads us to the concept of a stabilized approach. Can you explain that?
Sure. It's a fundamental safety rule. By the time an aircraft reaches 1,000 feet above the airport in instrument conditions, it needs to be perfectly configured for landing. On the right path, at the right speed, correct descent rate, engine spooled up correctly, everything's stable.
And if it's not stable by that 1,000-foot mark?
The procedure is mandatory. Go around, abort the landing, climb away safely, and set up for another attempt. No exception.
And was flight IX-812 stabilized?
Not even close. At 500 feet above the ground, they were descending at around 3,300 feet per minute. The limit is 1,000. 3
times the safe limit.
Yes. Engines were at idle, speed brakes were still out. It was completely unstable. You can sense the rising alarm in the cockpit. Around 6:03 a.m., the first officer says, "Runway straight down."
Meaning they were way too high, looking almost directly down at the runway.
Exactly. And the captain's response is just, "Oh my God."
That's chilling. The moment of realization, perhaps.
It seems so. And the plane itself started screaming warnings. The EGPWS, the Enhanced Ground Proximity Warning System, it's designed to prevent exactly this.
What does it say?
First, sink rate. Sink rate, because they were descending too fast. Then, just seconds later, the most critical one. Pull UP, pull UP. That's the system's loudest, most urgent command.
Pull up! Get away from the ground! But the captain, he didn't.
He persisted. And the first officer, he did his duty. According to procedure, he called out, "Go around" at 6.04.06, then unstabilized 2 seconds later.
He's calling it out.
He even made a third call, more urgently, over the radio. "Go around, Captain." And then on the internal intercom, you hear him say, "We don't have runway left."
We don't have runway left.
Yeah.
He knew they couldn't possibly land safely from that position.
Absolutely. He recognized the danger clearly.
So, why didn't he take control? This is the question everyone asks.
It's a critical point. The investigation highlighted what they called ambiguity in various instructions, empowering the co-pilot to initiate a go-around. Basically, the rules weren't crystal clear that he could or should physically take the controls from the captain.
Even in that situation.
Combine that ambiguity with the steep trans-cockpit authority gradient. We talked about that. Assertive captain who might be perceived as always right. And the first officer, despite knowing it was wrong, might have felt unable to intervene forcefully.
A breakdown in crew resource management. CRM.
Textbook CRM failure. The team didn't function as a team when it mattered most. Communication broke down, and assertiveness failed.
So warnings blaring, first officer calling for a go-around.
Yeah.
The captain presses on. He disconnects the autopilot just before the pull-up warning, so he's hand-flying now.
Yes, trying to salvage the landing manually. They touched down incredibly late, about 5,200 feet down the runway.
How much runway was left?
Only about 2,800 feet of paved surface, on a runway that slopes downhill at the end. And they were too fast. So fast, the flaps actually retracted briefly because of the aerodynamic load flap load relief before redeploying.
Not enough runway, too fast.
And then came the final, inexplicable decision. Right after touchdown, the captain deployed the thrust reversers, the braking system, using engine power.
Okay, trying to stop.
But literally 6 seconds later, he seems to change his mind and initiates a go-around from the ground. He pushed the engines to full power.
After deploying reversers, isn't that a huge no-no?
It's explicitly forbidden by Boeing SOPs. You commit to stopping once reversers are deployed on the ground. You cannot attempt to take off again. At the same time, brake pressure increased sharply. Maybe he saw something, an obstacle, the end of the runway rushing up. Complete confusion in those final seconds.
A sequence of conflicting actions. What happened then?
The aircraft couldn't stop. It overran the runway, went past the paved safety area, the RESA, and then 235 meters beyond the runway end, the right wing hit a concrete structure housing the ILS localizer antenna.
And crucially, this structure wasn't frangible. It didn't break away.
No, it was solid concrete. Airport structures near runways are supposed to be frangible, designed to break apart easily on impact to minimize damage to aircraft. This one wasn't. The impact sheared off the right wing and engine. The CVR picked up the captain saying, "A big one."
He knew they'd hit something substantial.
Yes. And then the aircraft careened through the airport fence and plunged down into the gorge about 500 meters away from the fence line. The impact and the immediate intense fire destroyed the aircraft.
Just horrific. And those 8 survivors,
Yeah.
how did they make it?
The report says they were all awake, aware of what was happening. They were incredibly fortunate to escape through breaks in the fuselage. The emergency exits weren't usable because of the way the plane came to rest and the damage.
And the rescue effort, you mentioned the terrain.
The airport fire crews, the RFF, were incredibly fast getting to the runway end near the ILS structure, like within 30 seconds. But the main crash site was down in that gorge. The terrain was rough. The access roads were narrow and winding. It significantly hampered efforts to get firefighters and equipment down there quickly. It took about 2 hours to get the fire fully under control.
A nightmare scenario for responders, too. So the investigation begins. What do they rule out first?
They were very thorough. They ruled out any problems with the plane itself, no airworthiness issues, no mechanical failures before impact, no bird strike, no sabotage, even checked for interference from personal electronic devices, nothing.
So it really came down to the operation of the flight.
Yeah.
Human factors.
Overwhelmingly. The official inquiry stated the direct cause was the captain's failure to discontinue that unstable approach and his persistence in landing, despite the first officer's 3 go-around calls and all the EGPWS warnings.
A failure to follow basic critical procedures.
Yes. And the contributing factors really flesh out why that happened. First, as we discussed, the captain's fatigue. That prolonged sleep, the likely sleep inertia. It impaired his judgment right at the critical moment.
Okay, fatigue. What else?
The descent planning, or lack thereof. The unavailable radar, the late descent clearance, being high on approach, they never really recovered from that initial disadvantage.
The setup was flawed from early on.
Right. And third, the first officer's role. His calls were correct, but he didn't take control. That ambiguity in the rules, combined with that steep authority gradient, it prevented the crucial intervention.
So individual errors compounded by systemic issues.
Exactly. The investigation also pointed fingers at AirIndia Express's broader systems. Their crew resource management training wasn't effective enough, especially for mixed crews with foreign captains and Indian co-pilots. That authority gradient wasn't being managed.
And you mentioned something about pilots being counseled for hard landings.
Yes, that was a significant finding. The airline apparently had a practice of formally counseling pilots for landings that were slightly firm, even if they were well within the aircraft's certified limits. Captain Galusica himself had been counseled for one.
So, could that create a pressure not to go around? Because a go-around might lead to scrutiny, maybe even another firm landing later.
That was the concern raised. It might subtly discourage pilots from making the safest call, the go-around, because they're worried about ending up in the chief pilot's office for a potentially bumpy but safe maneuver or a subsequent firm landing, a really dangerous unintended consequence.
Wow. Any other systemic points?
Lack of computerized crew scheduling was mentioned. It led to last-minute roster changes, making it harder for pilots to plan and manage their rest properly. And finally, the airport itself, that non-frangible ILS structure in the safety area, the downward slope, the poor access roads for rescue, these were flagged as infrastructure shortcomings.
So looking back at this whole tragic event, what's the main takeaway?
It really drives home that accidents like this are rarely caused by one single thing. It's a chain, a series of multiple errors, as the report says. But the most critical link in this chain, the one lesson that stands out starkly, is about the go-around.
That it's not a failure.
Absolutely not. A go-around is a safe, planned maneuver. It's an essential safety tool that gives you a second chance to get it right. The captain's decision here, to ignore the instability, ignore the warnings, ignore his co-pilot, and push on, that was the fatal deviation.
It leaves you thinking, doesn't it? Beyond aviation, in any field where pressure is high and stakes are critical, what does this tell us about human fallibility, about fatigue, about how authority dynamics can silence crucial warnings, about that urge to just get it done even when things are clearly wrong?
And maybe more importantly, how do we build systems, whether it's in aviation, medicine, finance, anywhere, that truly empower people to speak up, to challenge authority safely, and to take necessary actions, like that go-around, before it's too late? How do we make safety the default, overriding those human pressures?
A crucial question indeed. Something for all of us to reflect on.